Since the dawn of time, mankind has harnessed the power of fire to accomplish many goals no other creature could ever dream of. So when I began looking for inspiration for this project, I began to stare into the flames. And they stared back into me, giving me ideas of different art projects and styles I could do, until they whispered to me, "You should just check out the internet." Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be finishing up our diorama from last week. We are going to be putting a dragon on top of this mountain. So when I was coming up with the color scheme for this dragon, I just was going back and forth between if I wanted it to look kind of like an ice dragon or something frozen from something similar to the scenic that it would be placed in, or something with some different contrast, or maybe even more traditional. But I ended up deciding on some of these images surrounding me as the inspiration for this dragon, as a way to add some contrast to it. So during the creation of this base here, I decided to go ahead and assemble the dragon so I could get a better idea for where his feet need to be set and the varying levels of the ground there. So I went ahead, first thing I did was milliput the legs together and smooth it all out, creating the texture and detail there, and then after that was attached, reprime the whole thing black, and then we could get started on painting. The best way to get all the light values and heat properly would be to start with the brightest and then cover it up with varying layers to get the cooler colors in there. So the first thing I did was start with the yellow base to all the areas that I knew it was going to be shown to have heat, and then slowly layering out my reds and oranges all the way up to black to get the cooler section of the dragon. So around the chest, throat, and face, I added my heavy layers of yellow, layering them up until I had a nice vibrant yellow, and then slowly over each layer adding more orange, drawing it out towards the edges and darker parts, just as a way to really ensure that I got the best coverage and smooth transitions for each of these layers. Now, since I decided that the base for this model was going to be black and most of the scales would end up being black, I went ahead and primed it that way, which required that I either use heavier or thicker layers of paint to get that initial coverage, or multiple layers. So ultimately I ended up having to have that yellow coat on there multiple times before it really got good coverage. From that paint I was able to take down watered versions of each of these colors and really just layer them on there slowly to build up those smooth transitions, which worked really well for me in this process. And you'll see that especially on these wings where I was going through with the orange trying to get good coverage on there. That it's just so transparent that it really did just have to take multiple layers. And for such flat and broad spaces such as these wings, a larger brush really does work better than what I was using. But even at this point I'm about 3 layers into it, and I'm starting to thicken up my paint so that I can get better coverage, since I know that towards the end of these wings it'll be reds and blacks and be able to cover up pretty well. Now honestly I really loved using heat as a way to think about where my color should be. I knew that I wanted the spine and chest and throat and face to seem as the hottest points, so I was able to just build up the colors right there along the spine, along that fin, as well as all around the chest, shoulders, and stomach there. Now this was by far the largest model I've attempted to paint at this point, and honestly I really enjoyed that. Really pushed me out of my comfort zone, as well as a different painting style from something to seem more realistic. And if you were attempting or thinking about trying something new or totally alien to what you're used to, I would really recommend it, because honestly I think I learned a lot about the layering process doing this, as well as learning about painting something other than just texture, where you're really trying to get the transitions and lighting and color to really tell the story and create the character for you. And as far as using these colors as a heat source, I'm really looking forward to any of my future projects where I'm going to be using any kind of fiery blades or any kind of heat effects. So by the time I was at this point, I was starting to go in with the reds and really just focus on drawing out the heat to the very ends, where it could appear that it was cooling down, as well as just add some more variation of the color. So around the edges and ends of the plates on his chest there, as well as you could see on his face previously, and at the very tips of these plates as we work back down towards the spine to really just get that smooth transition of color, keeping the brightest colors right there on the spine. Next went on to the black, and honestly I thought this was a step that just added the most life and contrast to the piece, going through at the very tips of his horns and fins there, just slowly and very carefully working just a little bit back towards the red and blending it in smoothly. This was probably my thinnest layer of paint, and I just let it slowly build up so I could get that smooth transition to the red, as so it wouldn't look too blotchy or overpowering too. And this was definitely the step that seemed to cool down the dragon from those fiery reds and oranges all the way to a more neutral color. Well, it still remained that very hot look, but you could definitely play with this to any depth of heat you'd want to try to portray with this. So very carefully, just using the edge of my brush, I just follow along that spine and along some of the edge plates, as well as just darkened up some of the scales that had been previously brushed over with the oranges and reds, just to kind of make it more neutral and bring it back down to a consistent, even look. So for the final step for these wings, we're just to add that very thin line of black around the edge, following up those spines just a little bit, as well as just coloring those claws nice and dark black. And for these wings, this is definitely a step that you could take as much time as you wanted to really pull that heat back down. If you wanted to make them look a little colder, they're out away from the chest. Now for the final step, before we glue it all together and attach it to the base, which is to go through with a little bit of white and put it there in the eyes and mouth, and up against the very base of those plates along the chest, where it's going to be the hottest and brightest. Now my phone actually died while I was gluing it all together and putting it on the base, so I don't have that footage, but here's the final look at the project. So I really hope that you all enjoy this one. I really appreciate you all taking the time to reach this point of the video. And if you look forward to the next type of content or enjoyed this, please let me know in the comments and like this video. That stuff really does help it out. And remember, the first step to achieving is to take that first step to start. Thank you all for watching.